You know what's crazy? Right now, 3 miles beneath the Pacific Ocean, there's a Soviet submarine sitting on the seafloor with 92 dead men still inside. And here's the thing that'll blow your mind. The CIA spent $800 million trying to steal it. They built a ship the size of two football fields, invented technology that didn't exist, hired Howard Hughes as a fake front, and then they dropped it. Literally dropped half the submarine back into the ocean while lifting it up. But what they found in the part they did recover, that changed everything we thought we knew about the Cold War. This isn't some conspiracy theory. This actually happened August 1974, middle of nowhere in the North Pacific. A mechanical claw the size of a house is closing around a ghost ship that's been down there for 6 years. Soviet spy ships are circling above, watching, suspicious but completely fooled. And below deck on this CIA vessel, operators are sweating because they absolutely know that inside that submarine are nuclear missiles, encryption codes, and almost 100 bodies preserved in near-freezing water like some kind of underwater time capsule. The whole operation was called Project Azorian, and it remains one of the most expensive, most audacious, and most partially successful intelligence operations in history because, yeah, they got the submarine, well, part of it. And what they found inside, what they actually discovered when they finally cracked open that Soviet hull, man, it raises questions we still can't answer today. So let me take you back to March 9th. The world's on edge, Vietnam War's escalating, nuclear tensions between the US and Soviet Union are at their peak, and somewhere in the North Pacific, a Soviet ballistic missile submarine designated K-129 is on routine patrol. This thing's carrying 3 R-21 ballistic missiles, each one capable of hitting Hawaii or the US West Coast. It's got 98 men aboard. Commander's a guy named Vladimir Kubzar, 45 years old, experienced officer, knows what he's doing. March 8th, K-129 is supposed to radio in for its scheduled check. Standard Cold War protocol, you surface, send a coded transmission, submerge again, stay hidden, except March 8th comes and goes. Nothing. No transmission. Radio silence. Now here's where it gets interesting. The Soviets initially think it's just a communications problem, equipment malfunction, maybe atmospheric interference, whatever. But days pass, still nothing. So they launch this massive search operation, dozens of ships, aircraft, submarines scouring the ocean, and they find absolutely nothing because they're searching in completely the wrong place. K-129 had deviated way off its assigned patrol route. Why? Nobody knows. That's one of the mysteries that still haunts this whole thing. Did the commander receive different orders? Was there a navigation error? Was something else going on? We'll get to the theories, but right now, understand this. The Soviets have lost a nuclear missile submarine, and they have no idea where it is. But the Americans knew. See, the U.S. had this network called SOS, Sound Surveillance System, basically underwater microphones planted all across the ocean floor, listening for Soviet submarines. And on March 8th, multiple SOS stations picked up something. First, several explosions, then unmistakable, the sound of a hull imploding under pressure, metal crushing, compartments collapsing, the acoustic signature of a submarine dying. U.S. Navy intelligence triangulated the sounds and pinpointed the exact location within days. They knew where K-129 went down before the Soviets even realized the submarine was missing. And here's the decision they made. Don't tell the Soviets, don't help them search, just let them keep looking in the wrong spot while we figure out how to go down there and take it. Because think about what's sitting on that seafloor. Nuclear warheads with plutonium cores, ballistic missile technology, Soviet encryption machines and code books, radio equipment with all their frequencies, fire control computers, navigation systems. This is an intelligence goldmine. If the CIA can get their hands on this stuff, they can decrypt Soviet communications, understand their missile guidance systems, analyze their nuclear weapons design. It's worth any cost, any risk. There's just one tiny problem. K-129 is sitting at 16,500 feet. That's over 3 miles straight down. At that depth, the water pressure is around 7,000 pounds per square inch. The temperature's just above freezing. There's zero light. And in 1968, no technology exists that can lift a 2,000-ton submarine from that depth. So the CIA decides, screw it, we'll invent the technology. They put together this plan. They'll build a specialized ship with a giant mechanical claw, lower it on a 3-mile-long pipe string, grab the submarine, and lift the whole thing to the surface. Simple, right? Except it's never been done. The engineering challenges are insane. The costs are astronomical. And they have to do it all in secret while the Soviets are actively looking for their missing submarine. But first, they need to know for sure the submarine's where they think it is. So, summer of 1968, they send in the USS Halibut, this modified American submarine equipped with a deep sea camera sled they nicknamed Fish. Halibut quietly motors out to the coordinates, deploys the camera rig, and starts photographing the seafloor. And there it is, K-109 sitting upright in the sediment like it just parked there. The photographs show the hull's largely intact, the missile tubes are visible, but there's significant damage to the conning tower. The sail area is torn open. Whatever happened fast and violent. The crew never had a chance to send a distress call, never had time to surface, never knew what hit them. The CIA looks at these photographs and they're like, okay, we can do this. We can actually recover this thing. So they green light what becomes Project Azorian, and they authorize spending that would eventually hit somewhere between $500 to $800 million. In the 1970s, that's equivalent to like $4 billion today for one submarine. Now they need a cover story, because you can't just build a massive deep-sea recovery vessel without people noticing. So they come up with this brilliant plan. They're going to say they're mining manganese nodules from the ocean floor. These are mineral deposits that form naturally on the seafloor, and in the early 70s, there's legitimate interest in deep-sea mining. The story's plausible, but they need someone eccentric enough, rich enough, weird enough that people will believe he'd dump hundreds of millions into an experimental mining venture. And they find their guy, Howard Hughes, the billionaire, the aviation pioneer, the guy who's become such a recluse by this point that nobody even sees him anymore. Perfect patsy. They set up a front company through Hughes Glomar Corporation, announce this ambitious deep-sea mining project, and start building the ship. It's called the Hughes Glomar Explorer, and it's unlike anything ever constructed, 619 feet long. But here's the genius part. The entire center section of the ship opens up. It's got this massive internal moon pool, like a hidden garage that can swallow a submarine whole. The shipyard workers building it in Pennsylvania are told it's a mining vessel. They're installing what they think are manganese nodule collection systems. What they're actually building is a submarine recovery platform with pipe handling systems, internal containment bays, decontamination chambers for radiation, laboratories for intelligence analysis. The whole ship is basically a floating CIA laboratory disguised as a mining rig. And the capture device, they call it Clementine, this mechanical claw that weighs hundreds of tons with these massive hydraulic arms designed to close around a submarine hull like a hand grabbing a football. Except this football weighs 2,000 tons and it's 3 miles underwater. Oh, and they've never tested Clementine at anywhere near the target depth. They're just hoping the engineering calculations are right. The media buys the cover story completely. Mining industry journals publish technical specifications. Nobody questions why Howard Hughes would be interested in ocean floor minerals. The Soviets track the ship's construction. Their intelligence agencies photograph it, analyze it, and they believe it too. It's just another American commercial venture. Weird, expensive, probably won't work, but whatever. Hughes Glomar Explorer launches in 1973 and starts doing test missions, which are really just practice runs, getting the crew familiar with the systems. The team's this wild mix of CIA operatives, Navy specialists, civilian contractors, and most of them don't even know what they're really doing. The operation's so compartmentalized that deck workers think they're actually mining manganese, while below deck, cleared personnel are preparing to recover a Soviet submarine. August 1974, the Glomar Explorer steams out to the coordinates, and sure enough, a Soviet spy trawler starts following them. But the Americans just keep up the act, lowering equipment, pretending to mine, acting like this is totally routine. The Soviet ship maintains distance, watching but not interfering. They're suspicious, but they're bought the cover story just enough. Then the real work begins. They position directly over the wreck site and start lowering Clementine. This takes hours, literal hours, because they're lowering pipe string in sections, connecting piece after piece as the claw descends 3 miles into darkness. Each connection has to be perfect because the whole thing's under incredible stress, thousands of tons of weight suspended on this pipe. Can you imagine the tension on that ship? One failure, one pipe section that doesn't seal right, one structural flaw, and the whole thing's over. $800 million, years of planning, gone. And there's a Soviet spy ship right there watching them. Close enough that if something goes catastrophically wrong, the Soviets will know immediately that this isn't a mining operation. But Clementine reaches the seafloor. The operators are controlling it remotely through the pipe, camera feeds showing them what's happening 3 miles down, and they maneuver it into position over K-120. The hydraulic arms extend, position themselves around the submarine's midsection, and then they close. The claw grabs hold. This is the moment. Will it work? Can they actually lift a 2,000-ton submarine from this depth? They start the ascent, and K-129 breaks free from the sediment. It's rising, inches per minute, painfully slow, but it's rising. 15,000 feet, 14,000 feet, 13,000 feet. Hours are passing. The crew's watching monitors, tracking every measurement, every stress indicator. The Soviet ship still circling above, still clueless inside the submarine that's slowly rising toward them, preserved by cold and pressure like some underwater time capsule, are 98 dead men, nuclear weapons, encryption codes, everything the CIA's been desperate to get their hands on. This might actually work. And then at about 10,000 feet, roughly two-thirds of the way up, they hear it through the pipe system. Metal groaning, stress indicators spiking, and then the sound nobody wanted to hear, structural failure. The aft section of K-129 tears away from the rest of the hull. The missile compartment, the reactor section, the encryption gear in the aft spaces, most of the crew quarters, the main evidence of what caused the explosion, all of it breaks off and falls back toward the seafloor. 3 miles. It falls 3 miles back down, tumbling through darkness, and slams back into the sediment. Gone. The most valuable parts of the intelligence haul. Just the operators have a split-second decision. Do they abort completely, or do they continue lifting what's left? They run the calculations. The forward section's still in the claw, still intact. It's the bow, the torpedo room, some forward crew compartments. There's still intelligence value there. They make the call, continue the lift. So they bring up this mangled third of a submarine, torn open where the break occurred, seawater pouring out as they finally get it into the moon pool. They close the massive doors underneath, pump out the water, and for the first time, CIA operatives are standing in front of a Soviet ballistic missile submarine. The Soviet spy ship above them saw nothing. The cover held. As far as anyone knows, the Glomar Explorer is still just mining manganese nodules, but below deck they're preparing to enter this thing, and nobody knows exactly what they're going to find. The interior's been preserved by the cold, near-freezing temperatures down there, and when they start cutting through, getting access to the compartments, what they see stops them cold. The submarine's interior is exactly as it was on March 8th, 19... Duty stations, equipment, everything in place, and there are bodies. 6 bodies. 6 Soviet sailors preserved by the depth and cold, 2 in the torpedo room near the weapons stations, tools still in their hands, 4 more in the forward technical compartments, 1 near the communications panel. These guys died instantly, no warning, no chance to react. They're at their stations because that's where they were when whatever happened, happened. And here's what gets me about this. These sailors are in their 20s and 30s, young guys. They've got letters from home in their pockets, photographs of their families, Soviet military IDs, personal journals. One of them's got a wedding ring. They're just people. Cold War enemies, sure, but they're submariners doing their job, same as American submariners would be doing their job. The CIA team starts examining the hull damage, trying to figure out what killed these men, and the evidence points to an internal explosion. This wasn't an external attack. There's no torpedo damage, no depth charge effects. Something inside K-129 exploded. The question is what? Best theories based on the evidence they recovered are these. Could have been hydrogen gas buildup from the batteries. That was a known issue with Soviet submarines. Poor ventilation, gas accumulates, one spark and boom. Could have been a missile fuel leak. Those R-21 missiles use volatile propellants, a leak in the missile compartment. Ignition, catastrophic explosion. Could have been a torpedo detonation if the weapons were armed and something went wrong. A torpedo going off inside the hull would absolutely do this kind of damage. There's also this darker theory that's never been proven. Some people think K-129 might have been preparing to launch a missile without authorization, either a rogue commander or some kind of mutiny situation, and something went wrong during the launch sequence, but there's no solid evidence for that, and honestly, the evidence that would prove or disprove it fell back to the seafloor with the aft section. What's certain is this: the death was instant for the guys near the blast. K-149 probably lost power immediately, started flooding, and dove uncontrollably as explosions cascaded through the compartments. At 16,000 feet, when it hit bottom, the hull imploded. The men who weren't killed by the explosion were killed by the implosion. None of them suffered long. Small mercy, I guess. Now, the CIA's got this intelligence haul to sort through. They recovered 2 nuclear torpedoes intact, plutonium cores and everything, and they examine the design, the yield specifications, the whole deal. That alone is huge because now they understand Soviet nuclear weapon engineering way better. They get some code materials, a few encryption wheels, portions of code books, though most of it's water damaged and incomplete. They get to analyze the technology, the quality of Soviet engineering, manufacturing techniques, system designs. Was it worth $800 million? The CIA says yes, absolutely. The specific intelligence they gained is still classified to this day, but the consensus among intelligence historians is that Project Azorian provided insights that influenced Cold War policy for years. Whether that justifies the cost, I'll let you decide. But here's where this story takes a turn that surprised everyone. The CIA operatives looking at these 6 bodies, these 6 Soviet sailors who died doing their job, they're faced with a question. What do we do with them? They could keep the bodies for identification studies, intelligence purposes, whatever. They could just dispose of them at sea without any ceremony. Or they could do something nobody expected. They chose to honor them as sailors, as men who served their country and died in the line of duty, even though that country was the enemy. Even though this was the height of the Cold War, even though nobody would ever know about it, they built 6 caskets. They obtained Soviet naval flags through covert channels, obviously. They planned a full ceremony according to Soviet military tradition, and somewhere out in the Pacific, away from the Soviet spy ship's line of sight, they held a burial at sea. They played the Soviet national anthem. They spoke words in Russian. They rendered military honors. They read each man's name aloud, the ones they could identify from documents. They draped the Soviet naval ensign over the caskets, and they committed them to the sea with full honors. And here's the thing, they filmed it. The entire ceremony was recorded on classified film, locked in CIA vaults, marked top secret. The idea was maybe someday this could be useful diplomatically. Proof that even in the Cold War, even when stealing an enemy submarine, the Americans treated enemy dead with respect. The Soviet Union was never told about the recovery. The families of those 6 sailors weren't informed. They still believed the submarine's location was unknown, that their sons and husbands were somewhere out there in the ocean, undiscovered. The film sat in vaults for years while 92 other crew members remained 16,000 feet down in the aft section that fell back. And then in 1974, the same year as the recovery, everything started falling apart. There was a burglary at Howard Hughes's corporate offices in Los Angeles. Thieves looking for financial documents, whatever they could sell, and they accidentally grabbed files related to Project Azorian. These documents got leaked to journalists who started investigating. By 1975, the Los Angeles Times published the whole story. The CIA tried to suppress it, claimed national security concerns, but other media outlets picked it up. The Washington Post, the New York Times, details started emerging about the Hughes Glomar Explorer's real purpose, the submarine recovery attempt, the partial success and failure, the estimated costs. The public was amazed. $800 million to steal a submarine? That actually happened? And this is where the famous Glomar response comes from. The CIA started using the phrase, "we can neither confirm nor deny," when asked about Project Azorian, and that phrase became standard government speak for decades. Whenever there's something they don't want to discuss, boom, Glomar response. The Soviet reaction was surprisingly muted. They issued a brief protest, but nothing major. Why? Because admitting the full extent of what happened would have been embarrassing. It would have meant acknowledging they lost a nuclear submarine, that they searched in the wrong place for years, that the Americans deceived them completely and partially recovered the wreck. The KGB quietly studied the operation, learned from CIA's methodology, but publicly they just moved on. The families of K-19's crew still weren't told the truth. The Soviet government maintained the official story, submarine lost at sea, location unknown, case closed. For the sailors' families, the uncertainty continued. Project Azorian became this legendary CIA operation. Most expensive intelligence operation in history, demonstrated incredible technological capability, advanced deep-sea engineering by decades. The Hughes Glomar Explorer was briefly used for actual ocean mining after the cover was blown, then saw some Navy service, eventually got scrapped. K-129's aft section remained on the seafloor, undisturbed, along with 92 crew members. And then the Cold War ended. The Soviet Union collapsed. And in 1992, something remarkable happened. CIA Director Robert Gates met with Russian President Boris Yeltsin, and he brought a gift: the classified burial ceremony film. Russian officials watched it. They saw American CIA operatives and Navy officers honoring Soviet sailors with their own national anthem, their own flag, full military ceremony. Yeltsin's reaction was reportedly one of gratitude. These were Cold War enemies showing respect for enemy dead, and that meant something. The Russian Navy contacted the 6 families whose loved ones had been recovered. Imagine getting that call 24 years after being told your son died when his submarine was lost. You learn that Americans recovered his body, buried him with honors, filmed the ceremony. The emotions had to be overwhelming. Gratitude that he was treated with dignity, anger that you weren't told for 2 decades, grief reopening after all those years, but also closure, finally knowing the families of the other 92 sailors were told the truth too. Your loved ones are still down there, 16,000 feet deep in the aft section that was never recovered. Memorial services were held across Russia for K-19's entire crew. But here's what still bugs me about this whole thing. We still don't know why K-129 sank. The evidence points to an internal explosion, probably battery-related hydrogen gas, but maybe missile fuel, possibly a torpedo. The truth is, the evidence that would tell us for sure went down with the aft section. That part of the submarine still sitting on the ocean floor 3 miles down, and we're never going to get it. And why did K-129 deviate so far from its assigned patrol area? Was it navigation error? Equipment malfunction? Did Commander Kubzar receive different orders that weren't documented? Was there some kind of unauthorized activity? We don't know. That answer is lost too. What intelligence did the CIA actually gain from the recovery? Still classified. We know they got nuclear torpedo designs, some code materials, technical specifications, but the exact value of what they learned, the specific intelligence that came from Project Azorian that's locked up, maybe it'll be declassified someday, maybe it won't. There's this persistent theory that K-129 was preparing to launch a missile without authorization, either a rogue commander situation or some kind of mutiny, and that's what caused the explosion. But there's no solid proof, and honestly, that theory feels like it came from Tom Clancy novels more than actual evidence. The more likely explanation is boring technical failure, something went wrong with the batteries or the fuel systems, and 98 men died because of mechanical problems. The wreck site's known to intelligence agencies on both sides. GPS coordinates are in some classified file somewhere, but it's inaccessible for most purposes. The depth alone puts it beyond casual salvage capability, plus it's considered a war grave under international maritime law. The aft section's slowly deteriorating, corrosion eating through the hull, and eventually it'll collapse completely and dissolve into the seafloor. 92 Soviet sailors are still down there, still at their duty stations where protocol required them to be, still on what the Soviet Navy called eternal patrol, except in this case, it's literally true. They'll never surface, never receive orders to come home, never get the proper burial their 6 recovered comrades received. And think about this, the 6 sailors who were recovered and buried with honors, their burial location is classified too. Somewhere in the North Pacific, but the exact coordinates are secret, because revealing them would give away the Hughes Glomar Explorer's operating area during the recovery. So even the families who know their loved ones were treated with respect don't know exactly where they rest. The whole Project Azorian thing reveals something about the Cold War that I think gets lost sometimes. Yeah, it was about stealing enemy secrets and gaining intelligence advantages, but it was also about engineering ambition, about pushing technology beyond known limits. The CIA had to invent deep-sea recovery systems that wouldn't exist for commercial use for another 20 years. They built a ship specifically for one mission. They spent a significant percentage of their annual budget on a single operation.
And for what?
They dropped half the submarine. The most valuable intelligence, the ballistic missiles, the main encryption equipment, the evidence of what actually happened, all of it fell back down. What they recovered was useful, sure, but was it worth $800 million? The CIA insists yes, and maybe they're right. Maybe the intelligence they gained about Soviet nuclear weapons and communication systems really did influence Cold War strategy enough to justify the cost. Or maybe it's just one of those Cold War stories that demonstrates how insane the whole period was. Two superpowers with enough nuclear weapons to destroy the planet multiple times over, spending absurd amounts of money on intelligence operations, building elaborate cover stories involving eccentric billionaires, risking international incidents over a sunken submarine. 98 men died on K-129, not because of enemy action, not because the Americans sank them, but because something went wrong with their own equipment. They were casualties of Cold War service, same as any soldier who died during that period, except their death was probably preventable. Better battery ventilation, better fuel system safeguards, better safety protocols, any of those might have kept K-129 operational. The 6 who were recovered got honored by their enemies because even in the middle of global tension and nuclear brinkmanship, some people recognized that sailors are sailors regardless of what flag they serve. That ceremony on the Hughes Glomar Explorer, filmed in secret, might be one of the most quietly profound moments of the entire Cold War. Nobody had to do that. The bodies could have been treated as intelligence assets or simply disposed of. Instead, someone made the call to show respect. 3 miles down in the North Pacific, the aft section of K-19 continues to corrode. The 92 crew members still aboard are preserved in the cold and darkness, their stories lost with the evidence that would explain what happened to them. The forward section that was recovered was examined, cataloged, and presumably destroyed once intelligence value was extracted. The Hughes Glomar Explorer has been scrapped. Most of the people involved in Project Azorian are dead or very old now. But the mystery remains, why did K-129 deviate from its patrol area? What exactly exploded inside the submarine? Was there really any unauthorized missile activity, or is that just speculation? What intelligence did the CIA actually gain from the recovery? How much did those insights affect Cold War policy? We'll probably never know the full answers. Some secrets stay buried, literally in this case under 3 miles of water in one of the deepest parts of the Pacific Ocean. The Soviet Union that built K-129 doesn't exist anymore. The Cold War that justified spending $800 million to steal a submarine is over. The families of the crew have had to make peace with incomplete answers and decades of uncertainty. And somewhere in the Pacific, at coordinates nobody's revealing, 6 Soviet sailors rest in peace, honored by enemies they never met, their burial ceremony preserved on film that took 18 years to be seen by their countrymen. That's the story nobody talks about when they discuss Project Azorian. Everyone focuses on the engineering marvel, the elaborate cover story, the partial failure when the submarine broke apart. But 6 men got a proper burial at sea with full military honors from the nation they were trained to consider the enemy. That's what was inside K-129 when they finally got it to the surface. Not just nuclear weapons and code books and intelligence value measured in hundreds of millions of dollars. 6 human beings who served their country and died doing their job, and 92 more still down there, still on patrol, still waiting in the dark. The Cold War produced a lot of insanity, a lot of paranoia, a lot of close calls that could have ended civilization. But it also produced moments like that secret burial ceremony, moments where people chose humanity over ideology, respect over exploitation. Nobody had to honor those Soviet sailors. The decision was made anyway. 3 miles down, metal continues to corrode, secrets continue to rust away, and the mysteries of K-129, 92 men still aboard, eternal patrol in the deepest grave of the Cold War, those mysteries might outlast everything else about this story.